Found nude on a dark stretch of Interstate 77, 20-year-old Jaleayah Davis was a mystery that would county officials claim to have solved in just a few days. Her car was on the shoulder with the hazard lights blinking. The engine was still running. The doors were locked. Her clothes remained in the passenger seat. Her phone sat on the console. Everything she owned was still in that car, except Jaleayah. She was on the highway nearby, in a condition so brutal that the word accident has never sat right with the people who loved her. It was November 19th, 2011. Jaleayah was months away from the life she had worked toward, from the hospital shifts, the scrubs, the chance to finally put years of training into practice. Nursing wasn't a fallback for her. Her sister Maria has described it as an extension of who Jaleayah already was. She noticed the things others missed. She called just to hear a voice. She showed up without being asked, before anyone thought to ask. She had been that way her whole life. The degree was just going to make it official. Maria has spent 13 years in every space that would have her, from local interviews to national advocacy groups, talking about her sister. She doesn't speak like someone who has made peace with anything. She speaks like someone who stopped expecting good news a long time ago, but hasn't stopped demanding it anyway. She talks about the laugh, the phone calls, the way Jaleayah moved through a room like she already knew who needed something. On the night she died, Jaleayah had been at a friend's house. She left at approximately 3:48 in the morning. What happened in the window between that moment and when her car was found on I-77, who she may have encountered, what route she took, whether anyone else was on that road, is something her family believes was never seriously investigated. A missing stretch of time that should have been reconstructed hour by hour and wasn't. At some point, she got in her car. She drove onto I-77, and near mile marker 181, close to the Route 50 interchange outside Parkersburg, West Virginia, the night ended. The official account goes like this. Her vehicle struck a guardrail. She was thrown from the car. She died from the trauma of that impact. Accidental death. File closed. Now look at what was actually on that highway. Her car was running. The hazard lights were going. The doors were locked. Her clothes were on the seat. And Jaleayah was found on the pavement outside, nude, decapitated, with injuries that an independent forensic expert later concluded were not consistent with being thrown from a vehicle. The hazard lights are where the official story begins to break down. Someone had to press that button. Either Jaleayah did, meaning she was conscious and composed enough to pull over, put the car in park, and activate the hazards before whatever happened to her happened, or someone else did it. There is no third option. A car doesn't press its own hazard switch. And if Jaleayah was alert enough to do all of that, she was not someone who then accidentally ended up nude on the highway outside a locked vehicle. The two pictures don't connect. Then there's the engine, still running, doors locked from the inside. For the official story to hold, Jaleayah had to have been thrown from this car, while the engine ran, while the doors stayed locked, while her clothes and phone remained undisturbed on the seat. Reports on the exact condition of the windows have been conflicting, but what the family has maintained publicly is this. The car was not in the state you would expect from an impact violent enough to eject a human body. If the windows were intact and the doors were locked, the mechanics of how she ended up where she was found have no clean explanation, and the official ruling offered none. The condition of her body made the accident ruling even harder to accept. Jaleayah was found nude. She had been decapitated. The family has been explicit about these details not to generate shock, but because these are the facts that make the word accident a non-answer. Being thrown from a vehicle does not remove a person's clothing. A guardrail impact does not account for what was documented at that scene. The family looked at what they were told and what was actually found and recognized immediately that those were two different events being described as one. They hired an independent forensic pathologist, a professional with no stake in the outcome and no obligation to protect the original ruling. Someone who could look at the case documents, the injury reports, the available physical evidence, and give an honest assessment of whether the official account held together. It didn't. According to the family and those who have reviewed the case alongside them, the pathologist found that the injuries on Jaleayah's body did not fit the ejection narrative. Her hands bore marks that looked, according to the professional review, less like crash trauma and more like resistance, the kind of damage left when a person fights back against something or someone. Broken nails, specific wounds in specific places. The pathologist raised the possibility that some of what was documented on Jaleayah had occurred before she ended up on that highway. That the sequence the ruling assumed, crash, ejection, death, was not the accurate sequence at all. That finding should have reopened the question. A trained professional reviewing the evidence and saying it doesn't match is not a grieving family in denial. It is a forensic challenge to an official conclusion, and the appropriate response is scrutiny. A department willing to follow the evidence should have gone back, should have asked harder questions about the window conditions, the engine, the hazard lights, the timeline, should have treated an independent pathologist's contrary findings as the serious professional challenge they were. The ruling stayed. The case was not reopened. No further investigation was announced publicly. Maria began making phone calls. They went to voicemail. Then came the letters, sent to officials who responded with form language or who didn't respond at all. Meeting requests were made, some canceled, some producing nothing of substance. The years accumulated, more than a decade of the same cycle. Raise the question, reach the wall, find another door, find it locked. Everything the family did was through legitimate channels. They secured a professional opinion. They documented their concerns carefully. They presented specific physical questions about specific physical evidence and asked for specific answers. The response they received from official channels was not a detailed rebuttal of their evidence. It was not a thorough explanation of why the independent pathologist's findings were incorrect. It was silence. And silence, when what you've asked for is accountability, is its own kind of answer. When the independent pathologist pointed to the marks on Jaleayah's hands and the family expected action, what they found instead was a quiet that many black families in America know too well. Not a door slammed in their face, a door that was simply never opened. Meetings that were difficult to secure. Phone calls that required follow-ups and follow-ups to those follow-ups. The accumulated experience of being treated as peripheral in an investigation into their own daughter's death. Maria has been direct about this. These were not statistics in a research paper. They were the empty seats at meetings she finally managed to arrange. The officials who spoke to her like the outcome was already settled. The feeling, growing more concrete with each year, that the system had decided Jaleayah's file was closed and was simply waiting for her family to stop asking. They didn't stop. When official channels went quiet, the family went where people would listen. Advocacy organizations focused on missing and murdered black women became part of their network. Spaces where families of other women whose cases were handled too lightly kept each other moving forward. Online communities found Jaleayah's story and kept it in circulation. People with no connection to Parkersburg or to I-77 looked at the details, the running engine, the locked doors, the hazard lights, the condition in which she was found, and reached the same conclusion her family had reached since November 2011. The official account does not explain what was at that scene. That visibility doesn't reopen the file on its own. It doesn't produce a subpoena or compel a reinvestigation. But it keeps the case alive in the way cold cases need to stay alive, because cold cases turn on exactly the kind of moment that visibility makes possible. Someone who drove that stretch of I-77 on the night of November 19th, 2011, and noticed something, another vehicle, a figure on the road, headlights that shouldn't have been there, and never connected it to a news story they heard later. Someone who overheard something in the days that followed and filed it away. A fragment of information sitting in someone's memory that has never had anywhere to go until now. The Wood County Sheriff's Office in Parkersburg, West Virginia handles this case. That is where any information needs to go. Not certainty. Investigators determine what information means. Just a thing, whatever it is, however small it seems. She was supposed to be a nurse. Instead, her sister became something else. A woman who has spent 13 years making sure Jaleayah's name stays in rooms where decisions get made, in conversations that might eventually crack something open, in the mouths of people who never knew her but refused to forget her. The running engine, the locked doors, the hazard lights still blinking on a dark highway, her clothes on the seat. A forensic professional who reviewed the evidence and said this doesn't fit. A family that has spent 13 years being told there is nothing left to look at. There is always something left to look at when the truth hasn't been found. Jaleayah Davis, 20 years old, November 19, 2011. Interstate 77, mile marker 181, Parkersburg, West Virginia. Someone knows what happened on that highway. They've known for 13 years. It's time to say it.